Tell me, are you truly fit for any respectable position?
I am, ma'am. I've worked hard to be.
You are not what I expected. You are not fit for any gentleman, miss. I suggest you return home.
The rain hammered against the ballroom windows like accusations. Eliza Morland stood before Edmund Hawthorne, Duke of Blackmere, her dusty rose lace gown torn at the hem where little Edward had gripped it in terror. Water dripped from her unfashionable curves, pooling on the marble floor between them. The entire assembly had gone silent. She looked directly into his cold, dark eyes and said the words that would change everything. "I am not fit to be a duchess, Your Grace. I am too plain, too loud, and far too common for your world." The Duke's expression remained frozen, unreadable. Eliza's voice grew stronger. "But I will not abandon your children to the ghosts of this house." For the first time in 2 years, Edmund Hawthorne had nothing to say. The silence stretched like a chasm. His hand, which had been raised to dismiss her, slowly lowered. The coldness in his eyes flickered just for a moment into something else entirely. Behind him, Charlotte and Edward pressed against his legs, their wide eyes fixed on Eliza with desperate hope. The story had not begun here, of course. It had begun 6 weeks earlier, in a boarding house that smelled of lye soap and broken dreams. Mrs. Prudence Wilcox stood in the doorway of the washroom, arms crossed over her narrow chest. Her grey dress was buttoned to the throat, as severe as her expression. "Every woman your age has already left, Miss Morland. Married, employed, gone somewhere respectable." Eliza kept scrubbing the pot in her hands, though her knuckles had gone white. Mrs. Wilcox's voice sharpened. "Tell me, are you truly fit for any respectable position?" The words landed like stones in deep water. Eliza's hands stilled. She had heard those words before, in a different voice, on a different day that had carved itself into her memory. 3 years ago, a railway platform in Manchester. She had travelled 2 days to meet Mr. Horace Bligh, a gentleman who had placed an advertisement for a wife. His letter had been kind, hopeful even. He had written of companionship and mutual respect. When Eliza stepped down from the train, her small trunk in hand, Mr. Bligh had been waiting. She recognized him from his description, tall, greying at the temples, well-dressed. He looked at her. His eyes travelled from her face down her unfashionably curved figure and back up again. Then he laughed. Not a chuckle, but a full, cruel laugh that echoed across the platform. He did not touch her trunk. He did not ask her name. "You are not what I expected," he said, still smiling. "You are not fit for any gentleman, miss. I suggest you return home." He walked away. Eliza stood on that platform for 20 minutes before her legs would move again. She took the next train back with the same trunk, unopened. Those words, "not fit for any gentleman," had burrowed into her chest and made a home there. Now, Mrs. Wilcox was waiting for an answer. Eliza dried her hands on her apron slowly. "No, ma'am," she said quietly. "I suppose I am not fit for much of anything." Mrs. Wilcox smiled, satisfied. "Then you had better find new lodging. This house closes in 3 weeks. I have already accepted an offer from a developer." She left Eliza alone in the washroom. Eliza counted her money that night. £17, 6 shillings. Enough for perhaps 2 months of rent in a cheaper lodging, if she ate sparingly. Not enough to build any kind of future. But the next morning, while walking past the village church, she saw something pinned to the notice board outside. A handwritten note, the ink smudged as though written in haste. "Widower. 2 children in need of governess. Blackmere. Estate. Derbyshire. Immediate placement required. Inquire by post." The handwriting was unsteady, almost desperate. Eliza unpinned the notice. That evening, she spent a shilling on paper and postage and sent her inquiry. 3 days later, a response arrived, a single sentence and a train ticket. "Come at once. Duke of Blackmere." She packed her trunk, paid her final week's rent, and boarded the northbound train with £12 remaining to her name. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The train pulled into Blackmere Station on a grey Thursday afternoon. Eliza stepped onto the platform with her small trunk and looked around. The station was nearly empty, except for a group of 4 women clustered near the waiting room, all elegantly dressed, all laughing at some private joke. At the far end of the platform stood a man and 2 children. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a black frock coat with a high collar and a dark waistcoat that looked expensive but worn. His hair was nearly black, swept back from a face that might have been handsome if it were not so rigidly controlled. His expression was carved from stone. One hand rested protectively on the shoulder of the girl beside him. The children stood close to him like shadows. The girl looked about 8, thin and pale, wearing a faded blue dress that had been let out at the seams. The boy was younger, perhaps 5, in a tan vest and short trousers. Both children had the same haunted, guarded look in their eyes, the look of those who had learned not to hope for anything. The group of elegant women approached the man first. "Your Grace," one of them said, a blonde woman in a violet traveling suit. "We received your advertisement. We have come to discuss terms." The Duke inclined his head stiffly. "Miss Abigail Thornley and companions." Abigail smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "This is Miss Margaret Elwood, Miss Henrietta Collins, and Miss Dorothea Fairchild. We all possess excellent references and training in the education of noble children." Margaret, a redhead in green silk, looked at the children with barely concealed distaste. "They appear rather solemn. Their mother died 4 months ago." The Duke said flatly. "Oh, how dreadful," Henrietta murmured, though her tone suggested she found it more inconvenient than tragic. "And what are the wages, Your Grace?" £20 per annum, room and board included." Abigail laughed a high, brittle sound. £20 for 2 children. "I would require at least 40, plus my own chambers with a lock, and every Sunday free." Margaret nodded. "And a clothing allowance. This sort of work ruins one's wardrobe." Dorothea leaned closer to examine the children. "Are they well behaved?" "I will not tolerate wild or unruly children." The little girl flinched. The boy's lower lip began to tremble. The Duke's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "They are grieving children. They require patience and kindness." "How very unfortunate," Abigail said coolly. "But your terms are unacceptable, Your Grace. We have other appointments. Good day." The 4 women turned and walked away, already resuming their laughter as though the entire encounter had been an amusing diversion. The Duke stood motionless. The little girl's shoulders began to shake. Silent tears ran down her cheeks. Eliza felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked tight since that day on the Manchester platform. She picked up her trunk and walked toward them. Abigail noticed her movement and turned, her eyes widening with something like malicious delight. "Oh, this will be rich. You think he wants you?" The other women stopped to watch. Eliza ignored them. She walked straight to the Duke and set down her trunk. "Your Grace, I am Miss Eliza Morland. I responded to your advertisement." The Duke looked at her. His gaze traveled over her plain brown traveling dress, her unfashionably full figure, her work-roughened hands. She waited for the familiar expression, the disappointment, the dismissal, the barely concealed disgust. It did not come. He simply looked at her, waiting. Margaret laughed loudly. "Oh, this is perfect. Do tell us. Your Grace, is this what you were hoping for?" Eliza's face burned. The old shame rose up, choking her. But she forced herself to keep looking at the Duke, forced herself to speak the truth that had lived in her bones for 3 years. "I am not fit for any man, sir," she said, and her voice shook despite her best efforts. "I know that. I have known it for a very long time." The platform went utterly silent. Even Abigail stopped laughing. Eliza looked past the Duke at the 2 children, at the little girl with tears streaming down her pale face. at the boy clutching his sister's hand so tightly his knuckles were white. "But I can love your children," Eliza said, and her voice steadied. "I can care for them. I can make them feel safe again. I can be what they need, even if I am not what anyone wants." The Duke stared at her. The moment stretched out, painful and endless. Then he asked one question. "Will you stay?" Eliza's breath caught in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "I will stay." The Duke nodded once. Then he turned to his youngest child and gently picked her up. Without a word, he placed the little girl in Eliza's arms. The child was light as a bird, trembling all over. Eliza held her carefully, one hand supporting her small back, the other cradling her head. The girl pressed her face into Eliza's shoulder and began to cry deep, gasping sobs that sounded like they had been held back for months. "This is Charlotte," the Duke said quietly. "She is 8 years old. That is Edward. He is 5. Charlotte's arms wrapped around Eliza's neck. Her tears soaked through the fabric of Eliza's dress, warm and desperate. Eliza held her tighter. "Hello, Charlotte," she whispered. "I am so very glad to meet you." Edward stepped closer, his eyes wide and uncertain. He reached out one small hand and touched the edge of Eliza's sleeve, as though testing whether she was real. The Duke picked up Eliza's trunk with one hand. "The carriage is this way." As they walked away from the platform, Eliza heard Abigail's voice behind them, sharp with disbelief. "He chose her. Over us." Eliza did not look back. Blackmere Estate rose from the moorland like a monument to grief. The carriage wound up a long drive lined with overgrown hedges and stopped before a sprawling manor house built of dark grey stone. Ivy climbed the walls like grasping fingers. Several windows on the upper floors were shuttered. The Duke helped Eliza down from the carriage. Charlotte and Edward tumbled out after her, staying close. The front door opened, and an elderly woman emerged. She wore black from head to toe, her white hair pulled back severely. Her expression was carved from the same stone as the house. "Mrs. Grimsby," the Duke said. "This is Miss Morland. She will be governess to the children." Mrs. Grimsby's gaze swept over Eliza with cold assessment. "I see. Follow me, Miss Morland. I will show you to the nursery." The entrance hall was vast and shadowed, dominated by a grand staircase that curved upward into darkness. Portraits lined the walls, stern-faced ancestors staring down with judgment. The air smelled of dust and beeswax and something else, something Eliza could not name. Loneliness, perhaps. Charlotte tugged at Eliza's sleeve. When Eliza looked down, the girl whispered, "Everyone leaves. I will not leave," Eliza said firmly. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears again, but she did not cry. She had learned not to hope. Mrs. Grimsby led them up 3 flights of stairs to the nursery wing. The rooms were clean but sparse. 2 small beds, neatly made, a worn rug, shelves of books that looked untouched, a rocking chair by the window. The children take breakfast at 7, lessons until noon, outdoor exercise in the afternoon, Mrs. Grimsby recited. They are to be in bed by 8. His Grace does not tolerate disruption. Where is His Grace now? Eliza asked. In his study. He is not to be disturbed unless there is an emergency. Mrs. Grimsby left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Eliza sat down in the rocking chair. Charlotte and Edward stood in the middle of the room, watching her with those haunted eyes. "Come here," Eliza said gently. They did not move. "Please," Eliza added. "I would very much like to know you both." Edward took one hesitant step forward, then another. Charlotte followed. They stopped, just out of reach. "Charlotte," Eliza said, "what do you like to do?" The girl's voice was barely audible. "I used to like drawing." "And you, Edward?" The boy looked at his sister, then back at Eliza. He said nothing. Charlotte answered for him. "He does not talk anymore. Not since Mama died." Eliza's heart broke cleanly in half. "I see. That must be very hard." She stood and walked to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. She pulled out a volume of fairy tales, well-worn and clearly beloved. "Shall I read to you?" Edward's eyes lit up just for a moment before the guardedness returned. Eliza sat back down and opened the book. Come, sit with me, if you like. Charlotte climbed into the chair first, settling against Eliza's side. Edward hesitated, then clambered up on the other side. They were both so small, so fragile. Eliza began to read. Her voice filled the quiet room, steady and warm. Charlotte leaned her head against Eliza's shoulder. Edward's breathing gradually slowed. By the time Eliza finished the second story, both children had fallen asleep. She sat there for a long time, holding them, feeling the weight of their trust so tentatively offered, so desperately needed. Through the window, she could see the moors stretching away into the distance, bleak and beautiful under the grey sky. Somewhere below, in his study, the Duke of Blackmere sat alone in the dark. Eliza woke the next morning to find Charlotte already dressed, standing by the window. The girl's hair had been braided neatly, though one ribbon hung loose. "Good morning," Eliza said. "Did you do your hair yourself?" Charlotte nodded. "I do it every day. And Edward's buttons? Papa does not remember." "I see. Come here, and I will fix your ribbon." Charlotte approached cautiously. Eliza retied the ribbon with gentle fingers, then smiled. "There. Perfect." Edward appeared in the doorway, his shirt buttoned incorrectly, his hair standing up in odd directions. He looked at Eliza with solemn eyes. "Good morning, Edward," Eliza said. "Shall we fix those buttons together?" He came to her without hesitation this time. She knelt and carefully unbuttoned his shirt, then helped him button it properly. His small hands fumbled with the task, but she waited patiently until he managed the last button himself. "Well done," she said. The ghost of a smile flickered across his face. At precisely 7 o'clock, a maid appeared to summon them to breakfast. They descended to a small dining room where the Duke already sat at the head of the table, reading correspondence. He did not look up when they entered. The children sat silently, hands folded in their laps. A maid brought porridge and toast. Charlotte and Edward began to eat mechanically, without appetite. The Duke continued reading. He did not speak. He did not acknowledge their presence. Eliza watched him carefully. His face was hard, distant, as though he were carved from the same stone as his house. His jaw was set, his mouth a thin line. Everything about him suggested a man who had locked himself away from feeling anything at all. "Your Grace," Eliza said quietly. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers with cold surprise. "The children would like to know what activities you have planned for them today." His expression did not change. "They have no activities. Their lessons are your responsibility." "Of course. But I thought perhaps you might join us for a walk this afternoon. The weather appears fine. I have a state business. Tomorrow, then?" "Miss Morland." His voice was flat, final. "You were hired to manage the children. I expect you to do so without disturbing me unnecessarily." Charlotte's shoulders hunched. Edward's spoon clattered against his bowl. Eliza felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "I understand, Your Grace. Forgive the intrusion." He returned to his correspondence without another word. After breakfast, Eliza took the children to the nursery and began their lessons. Charlotte could read well, but had fallen behind in arithmetic. Edward sat silently, listening but not participating. At noon, Eliza bundled them into coats and took them outside. The grounds were extensive, a wild garden overgrown with weeds, a stable with only 2 horses, paths that disappeared into the moors. "Where would you like to explore?" Eliza asked. Charlotte pointed to a path leading toward a copse of trees. "Mama used to take us there. There is a pond." They walked together, the children gradually relaxing as they left the house behind. The pond was small and still, surrounded by cattails. A family of ducks paddled across the surface. Edward tugged Eliza's sleeve and pointed at the ducks. "Would you like to feed them?" Eliza asked. He nodded eagerly. They spent an hour by the pond, tearing up bread and throwing it to the ducks. Charlotte laughed a real laugh, bright and clear. Edward smiled more than once. On the walk back to the house, Charlotte slipped her hand into Eliza's. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "For what, darling?" "For being here. For not leaving yet." Eliza squeezed her hand. "I told you, I will not leave." That evening, after the children were in bed, Eliza went downstairs to speak with Mrs. Grimsby. She found the housekeeper in the kitchen, reviewing the household accounts. Mrs. Grimsby, may I ask about the Duchess? The housekeeper's expression hardened. The late Duchess passed 4 months ago. Consumption. The children loved her very much. Of course they did. She was their mother. And the Duke? Does he speak of her? Mrs. Grimsby set down her pen. His Grace does not speak of anything, Miss Morland. He works from dawn until midnight, and he does not wish to be reminded of his grief. I suggest you follow his example, and keep to your own duties. Where are the portraits of the Duchess? I have not seen any in the house. His Grace ordered them removed. Eliza felt that anger flare again. He is hiding from his own pain, and abandoning his children to theirs. Mrs. Grimsby stood abruptly. You overstep, Miss Morland, drastically. His Grace is a duke. You are governess. Remember your place. My place is with those children. And they deserve better than a father who cannot bear to look at them, because they remind him of what he lost. That is quite enough. Eliza left the kitchen, her hands shaking. But she was not afraid. She had not come to Blackmere to be silent. The days fell into a rhythm. Eliza woke early, helped the children dress, shared silent breakfasts with the Duke, who never spoke unless addressed directly. She taught lessons in the morning, reading, writing, arithmetic, history. Charlotte was bright and eager when encouraged. Edward listened intently, but still would not speak. In the afternoons, they explored the estate. Eliza discovered a walled garden behind the house, completely overgrown. She found gardening tools in a shed and enlisted the children's help in clearing away weeds. What shall we plant? She asked. Roses, Charlotte said immediately. Mama loved roses. They spent a week clearing the garden. Charlotte worked with fierce determination. Edward pulled weeds with small, careful hands. By the end of the week, they had reclaimed a space large enough for flower beds. On Saturday, Eliza walked into the village and purchased rose seedlings with her own money. When she returned, Charlotte threw her arms around Eliza's waist. You remembered, the girl whispered. Of course I remembered. They planted the roses together. Edward patted the soil around each one with solemn concentration. That evening, Eliza went to the Duke's study. She knocked and waited. Enter. She pushed open the door. The room was dark except for a single lamp on the desk. The Duke sat surrounded by ledgers and correspondence, his face drawn with exhaustion. Miss Morland, is there an emergency? No, Your Grace. I came to inform you that we have restored the walled garden and planted roses. The children would be very pleased if you would visit it tomorrow. He looked at her as though she had spoken in a foreign language. I have no time for gardens. Your Grace, your children need you. They have you. I am not their father. His expression hardened. They are fed, clothed, and educated. That is sufficient. It is not. Eliza stepped closer to the desk. They are grieving and lost, and you have abandoned them to their sorrow because you cannot face your own. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You forget yourself, Miss Morland. No, Your Grace. I remember myself very clearly. I remember being told I was not fit for anything. I remember believing it. I will not stand by and watch you teach your children that same lie that they are not worth your time or attention or love. They stared at each other across the desk. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the wood. Leave, he said quietly. Eliza did not move. Charlotte tries to mother Edward because she thinks if she is good enough, you will notice her. Edward stopped speaking because no one was listening. I said leave. Visit the garden tomorrow, please. She left before he could respond. The next morning, Eliza took the children to the garden after breakfast. They watered the roses and pulled a few remaining weeds. Charlotte chattered about which roses would bloom first. Edward carefully arranged pebbles around one of the seedlings. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Eliza looked up. The Duke stood at the garden gate. He was dressed less formally than usual, no coat, just a waistcoat and shirt sleeves. His expression was still guarded, but something in his eyes had softened. Charlotte froze. Papa, He stepped into the garden slowly, looking around at their work. "You have been busy. We planted roses," Charlotte said breathlessly, "like Mama had." The Duke's throat worked. He nodded. "They are well placed." Edward ran to him suddenly, grabbed his hand, and tugged him toward the pebble arrangement. The boy pointed proudly at his work. The Duke looked down at his son. For the first time since Eliza had met him, his expression cracked. He knelt in the dirt and examined the pebbles carefully. "This is very fine work, Edward," he said quietly. Edward beamed. The Duke stayed for half an hour. He helped Charlotte stake one of the taller seedlings. He listened to Edward's silent explanations of where each plant should go. He did not smile. But the rigid coldness had thawed, just slightly. Before he left, he looked at Eliza. "Thank you, Miss Morland." Then he walked back to the house. Charlotte grabbed Eliza's hand. "He came. Papa came. Yes, darling, he did." That night, Eliza lay in her small bed in the nursery wing and allowed herself to hope just a little that the Duke might find his way back to his children. And perhaps, in doing so, he might find his way back to himself. Spring came slowly to Blackmere. The roses began to leaf out, promising blooms in a few weeks. The children grew stronger, more confident. Charlotte laughed frequently now, and Edward, though still silent, had begun to hum while he worked in the garden. The Duke visited the garden twice more. Each visit was brief, but he paid attention to the children's excited explanations and occasionally offered quiet praise. One afternoon in late April, Eliza was kneeling in the dirt, showing Edward how to thin seedlings, when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Morland." She looked up to find the Duke standing at the gate, holding a wooden box. "Your Grace." She stood quickly, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Is something wrong?" "No. I found this in the attic. I thought the children might use it." He brought the box to her. Inside were gardening tools, sized for small hands, a trowel, a small rake, a watering can painted with flowers. Eliza's throat tightened. These were hers. "Yes. She gardened with them when she was young." He paused. "I thought it wrong to keep them locked away." Charlotte had noticed and came running. "What is it?" "Tools your grandmother used when she was your age," the Duke said. "Your mother wanted you to have them." Charlotte lifted the little trowel reverently. Edward peered into the box with wide eyes. "Thank you, Papa," Charlotte whispered. The Duke nodded stiffly. Then, instead of leaving immediately, he knelt and began helping Edward plant a row of lavender. His movements were awkward at first, but he followed Edward's silent instructions with surprising patience. Eliza watched them work together, father and son, rebuilding something that had been broken. "Miss Morland," the Duke said without looking up. "You were correct. I have been absent. You were grieving, Your Grace. That is no excuse for neglecting my children." He sat back on his heels. "My wife would be ashamed of me. I suspect she would forgive you," Eliza said gently. "As your children have." He looked at Charlotte and Edward, both absorbed in their planting. "They deserve better than what I have given them. Then give them better now. You have time." He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw past the coldness to the raw pain beneath. "I do not know how to be what they need. You are already learning. You came today. You brought them their grandmother's tools. You are here, in the dirt with them, planting lavender. That is more than enough." They worked in comfortable silence until the sun began to set. When the children were called in for supper, the Duke walked with them back to the house, instead of disappearing to his study. At dinner, he asked Charlotte about her reading lessons. He listened to her enthusiastic description of the fairy tale they had finished that afternoon. He did not interrupt or dismiss her. After the meal, as Eliza was taking the children upstairs, the Duke called after her. "Miss Morland, a word, please." She sent the children ahead and returned to the dining room. The Duke stood by the window, his back to her. "I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I was discourteous. You were protecting yourself. That does not excuse my behavior." He turned to face her. "You have done more for my children in 6 weeks than I have done in 4 months. I am grateful." Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. "They are easy to love, Your Grace." Something flickered in his expression. Yes, they are. They stood in the fading light, the silence between them no longer cold but oddly comfortable. Good night, Miss Morland. Good night, Your Grace. As Eliza climbed the stairs, she felt something shift inside her, something dangerous and impossible. She pushed it firmly away. She was the governess. He was a duke. That was all they could ever be. May brought rain and wild roses blooming along the garden walls. The children flourished. Charlotte had progressed remarkably in her studies, and Edward, though still silent, had begun attempting to form words with his lips, mouthing them soundlessly. The Duke continued to visit the garden regularly. He began taking dinner with the family instead of in his study. He was still reserved, still careful with his emotions, but the ice had melted considerably. Eliza tried not to notice the way her heart lifted when he entered the room. She tried not to think about the rare moments when he almost smiled, or the way his voice softened when he spoke to the children. But she was only human, and he was, despite everything, a good man slowly finding his way back to the light. One evening, after the children were asleep, Eliza went to the library to return a book. She found the Duke there, standing before the fireplace with a letter in his hand. His expression was troubled. Your Grace. Are you well? He looked up. Startled. Miss Morland. I did not hear you enter. I apologize for the intrusion. I was returning a book. No need to apologize. He hesitated, then gestured to the letter. I have received word from London. There is concern about the household. Eliza's stomach tightened. What sort of concern? My late wife's cousin, Sir Lionel Ashcroft, has written to express his shock that I have employed an unmarried woman to care for my children without proper supervision. I see. He suggests it is improper, that it reflects poorly on the family name. Eliza set down the book carefully. I understand, Your Grace. If you require me to leave, no. The word was sharp, immediate. He crossed the room toward her. That is not what I want. Then what do you want? He stopped, just in front of her, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. I want my children to be happy. They are happy with you. For the first time since their mother died, they laugh. They hope. They are children again. But Sir Lionel is a pompous fool who cares more about appearances than people. His jaw tightened. However, he is also a magistrate and a man of influence. If he decides to make trouble, he could petition the court to remove the children from my care, claiming I am an unfit father. Fear shot through Eliza. He would not. He might. He has always resented my title and my wife's devotion to me. The Duke ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it. I will not let him take my children. I will not lose them. Then what do we do? He looked at her for a long moment. We could marry? The world tilted. Eliza grabbed the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. Your Grace, it would be a practical arrangement, he said quickly. To protect the children, to silence the gossip. Nothing more, nothing more, Eliza repeated faintly. Unless, he stopped, unless you would prefer to leave. I would understand. I would provide references and enough money to... No. Eliza straightened. I will not leave Charlotte and Edward. If marrying you is what protects them, then I will do it. Relief flooded his face. You are certain? I am certain I love those children. I am certain I will do whatever is necessary to keep them safe. Thank you, Miss Morland. Eliza, she said. If we are to marry, you should call me Eliza. He nodded slowly. Eliza, my name is Edmund. Edmund, she repeated, testing the shape of it. They stood in the firelight. Two people who had agreed to marry for all the wrong reasons, or perhaps all the right ones. We should tell the children in the morning, Edmund said. They should hear it from us before anyone else. Agreed. Eliza left the library in a daze. She climbed the stairs to her small room and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She was going to marry a duke. Not because he loved her, he had made that clear. Not because she was fit to be a duchess, she knew she was not, but because two small children needed protection, and she would walk through fire to give it to them. She lay down and stared at the ceiling, wondering what she had just agreed to, and whether her heart would survive it. We are halfway through Eliza's journey, and she is fighting for these children with everything she has. It is heartbreaking, is it not? To think that some people watch her struggle and do not even take 1 second to hit the subscribe button. We pour our hearts into these stories of hope and healing. If you are enjoying this but have not subscribed, you are leaving Eliza to face the Duke and all of London society alone. Do not be like the cold aristocrats of Blackmere. Show some heart. Hit subscribe and like this video so we know you care about her happy ending. We need your support to keep bringing you these powerful stories. They told the children at breakfast. Charlotte dropped her spoon, her mouth falling open. You are going to marry Papa? Yes, darling, Eliza said gently. If that is acceptable to you. Edward's eyes went very wide. He looked from Eliza to his father and back again. Does this mean you will stay forever? Charlotte whispered. Yes, forever. Charlotte launched herself from her chair and into Eliza's arms, nearly knocking her over. Edward followed immediately after, wrapping his small arms around both of them. Edmund watched from his place at the head of the table, his expression soft in a way Eliza had never seen before. When? Charlotte demanded. When will you marry? Soon, Edmund said. Within the month, the children cheered. The announcement was sent to the village vicar and posted in the local parish. Within 2 days, the gossip had spread throughout the countryside like wildfire. On the 3rd day, a carriage arrived from London. Mrs. Grimsby announced the visitors with barely concealed disapproval. Miss Abigail Thornley, Miss Margaret Elwood, and Miss Henrietta Collins, to see his grace. Edmund received them in the drawing room. Eliza was in the garden with the children, but Charlotte, always curious, insisted on peeking through the window. They look angry, Charlotte reported. Through the glass, Eliza could see Abigail pacing, while Margaret and Henrietta sat with rigid postures. Their voices carried faintly. This is absolutely scandalous, Your Grace, Abigail was saying. You rejected all 4 of us women of impeccable breeding and education to marry a common governess. Miss Morland is not common, Edmund said coldly. She is a nobody. She has no title, no connections, no fortune. She is entirely unsuitable to be a duchess. She is suitable to be a mother to my children. That is what matters. Margaret stood abruptly. The Tun will never accept her. She will be humiliated at every turn. Is that truly what you want for your bride? What I want is for my children to be happy and safe. Miss Morland provides both. Henrietta's voice was poisonous. How very touching. I wonder what your late wife would think of this arrangement. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Edmund's voice, when he spoke, was lethal. Do not presume to speak of my wife. You did not know her. You know nothing of what she would have wanted. I know she would not have wanted her children raised by a woman who is... Enough. Edmund stood. This interview is concluded. Mrs. Grimsby will show you out. You will regret this, Abigail hissed. We will make certain of it. They swept from the room in a rustle of expensive silk and wounded pride. Charlotte turned from the window, her face pale. They are going to hurt you, are they not? You and Papa both. Eliza pulled her close. They are going to try, but we will not let them. That night, Edmund found Eliza in the nursery after the children were asleep. I apologize for subjecting you to their venom, he said quietly. You did not subject me to anything. I was in the garden. Charlotte was at the window. She heard, Charlotte is resilient. Edmund moved to the window, looking out over the darkened grounds. Abigail was correct. About one thing. The Tun will not accept you easily. You will be mocked, scorned, excluded. I have been mocked and scorned before. I survived. He turned to look at her. You deserve better. I deserve exactly what I have. 2 children who love me and a purpose that matters. She hesitated. Unless you are having second thoughts. No. He crossed the room and took her hand the first time he had touched her beyond the courtesies. His fingers were warm, calloused from work. I am not having second thoughts. But I want you to know what you are agreeing to. You will be scrutinized, judged, found wanting by people who have nothing better to do than enforce their narrow standards. Edmund, I have been found wanting my entire life. I learned long ago not to measure myself by the opinions of those who do not matter. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, You are remarkable, Eliza Morland. I am practical. You are brave. She smiled despite herself. I am terrified, but I am also determined. Then we are well matched. He released her hand and stepped back, the moment broken. The banns will be read this Sunday. The ceremony will follow 3 weeks hence. Very well. After he left, Eliza sat in the rocking chair and allowed herself one moment of pure terror. She was going to marry a duke. She was going to become a duchess. She plain, plump, unsuitable Eliza Morland was going to step into a role she had never imagined and face a society that would despise her for it. But Charlotte and Edward were asleep in the next room, safe and loved. That was all that mattered. The banns were read on Sunday. Eliza sat in the front pew beside Edmund, Charlotte, and Edward. The villagers stared openly. Whispers rustled through the congregation like wind through dead leaves. After the service, several families approached to offer congratulations, though their smiles were strained and their words carefully neutral. On Monday morning, a formal letter arrived from London. Mrs. Grimsby brought it to Edmund during breakfast. He read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each line. "What is it?" Eliza asked. He set down the letter carefully. Sir Lionel Ashcroft has petitioned the court for an emergency review of the children's welfare. He claims that my decision to marry an unsuitable woman demonstrates poor judgment and raises concerns about my fitness as a father. Charlotte gasped. He cannot take us away. He cannot. He is attempting to, Edmund said grimly. The hearing is scheduled for Friday, in London. 3 days. Eliza breathed. If the court rules against me, the children will be removed to Sir Lionel's custody, pending a full investigation. Edward began to cry silently, tears streaming down his face. Charlotte grabbed Eliza's hand in a crushing grip. We will fight this, Eliza said firmly. We will go to London, and we will fight. Edmund met her eyes across the table. You understand what this means? You will have to appear before the court. They will question you, interrogate you about your background, your suitability. They will attempt to humiliate you. Let them try. They traveled to London on Wednesday. The journey took a full day. Charlotte and Edward were silent, pressed against Eliza in the carriage. Edmund stared out the window, his jaw tight. They stayed at Edmund's townhouse in Mayfair. It was grand and cold, clearly unused for months. Dust covers shrouded the furniture. That evening, Edmund met with his solicitor, Mr. Frederick Hawley, while Eliza put the children to bed. They were too frightened to sleep. She lay between them, holding them both, and told them stories until their breathing finally slowed. When she went downstairs, she found Edmund in the library with Mr. Hawley and 2 other men, Lawrence Whitford and Charles Montague, both barristers. Ah, Miss Morland, Mr. Hawley said, standing. We were just discussing strategy. What is our position? Eliza asked. Mr. Whitford gestured to a chair. Please, sit. The situation is delicate. Sir Lionel is arguing that His Grace's judgment is compromised by grief, and that his decision to marry so far below his station demonstrates instability. I see. And our counter-argument? That His Grace is acting in the children's best interests, that you have proven yourself an excellent governess, and that the children are thriving under your care. Will that be sufficient? The men exchanged glances. Mr. Montague spoke carefully. It may not be, Miss Morland. The court tends to favor tradition and propriety. Your lack of social standing will count heavily against you. Then we need something stronger, Eliza said. We need proof that the children are better off with me than with Sir Lionel. What sort of proof? Edmund asked. Eliza thought quickly. Sir Lionel has never met the children. He does not know them. He certainly does not love them. If we can demonstrate that he is motivated by malice rather than genuine concern, we can undermine his petition. Mr. Hawley nodded slowly. That is sound reasoning. We would need evidence of his true motives. He resented my marriage to Edmund's late wife, Edmund said. He expected her to marry him. When she chose me instead, he became vindictive. Do you have correspondence that demonstrates this? Mr. Whitford asked. I may. My wife kept all her letters. They spent the next day searching through boxes of correspondence stored in the attic. Eliza found what they needed, a series of letters from Sir Lionel to Edmund's late wife, growing progressively more bitter and accusatory after she announced her engagement. In one letter, he wrote, "You have made a grave mistake, choosing that upstart over me. I will not forget this insult. When he fails you, as he inevitably will, do not expect my sympathy." "This proves his animosity," Mr. Hawley said, "but it may not be enough. We need to demonstrate that he is unfit to care for children." Eliza remembered something Charlotte had mentioned weeks ago. Charlotte, said Sir Lionel, visited once, shortly after the Duchess died. He told her she was being dramatic about her grief and needed to compose herself. She was 7 years old. Edmund's hands clenched into fists. "I was not there. I did not know. Can the children testify?" Eliza asked. "Absolutely not," Mr. Montague said immediately. "The court would never allow it. Too traumatic." "Then I will testify," Eliza said. "I will tell them exactly what Charlotte told me. I will describe the children's state when I arrived, and their transformation since. I will make the court see them as human beings, not legal abstractions." Edmund looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "You are certain." "I am certain I will do whatever is necessary." The night before the hearing, Eliza could not sleep. She paced her room, rehearsing what she would say to the court. Every possible question, every potential attack. She was still awake at midnight when she heard footsteps in the hallway, a soft knock on her door. "Eliza, it is Edmund. May I come in?" She opened the door. He stood in the corridor, in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, his cravat missing, his hair disheveled. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "I cannot stop thinking about tomorrow. About what they will say to you." She stepped aside. "Come in." He entered and stood by the window, looking out at the dark street. "I have asked too much of you. This entire arrangement, it is unfair. You should not have to endure this, Edmund. We have been over this. I know. But tonight, I am questioning everything." He turned to face her. "What if we lose? What if the court takes the children anyway, and you have sacrificed your reputation for nothing? Then I will have sacrificed my reputation for the right reasons." "Eliza, Edmund, listen to me." She crossed the room and stood before him. "I am not afraid of what they will say tomorrow. I am not afraid of their judgment or their scorn. The only thing I fear is losing Charlotte and Edward. Everything else is noise." He stared down at her, his expression raw. "How are you so brave?" "I am not brave. I am just a woman who loves 2 children and will fight for them." "It is more than that." His voice dropped. "You are more than that." The air between them changed, charged with something unnamed. "Edmund," she whispered. He reached up slowly and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, calloused, gentle. "I need you to know something before tomorrow." "What?" "This is not just about the children anymore. It has not been for weeks." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I do not want to marry you simply to protect them. I want to marry you because when I am near you, I remember what it feels like to hope. Because you have brought light back into a house that was dying. Because..." She rose onto her toes and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent electricity through her entire body. When she pulled back, Edmund's eyes were wide with shock. Then he smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face, and kissed her again. This time it was not brief. It was deep and slow and filled with months of unspoken longing. His arms came around her, pulling her close. She gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him, the rapid beat of his heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Edmund rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Eliza Morland," he said. "I do not know when it happened, but it is true." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. I have tried not to. I thought it was impossible." "Nothing about you is impossible." They stood there in the quiet room, holding each other, until the first light of dawn began to touch the sky. "We should sleep," Edmund said reluctantly. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "Stay with me," Eliza whispered. "Just hold me, nothing more." He nodded. They lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, wrapped in each other's arms. For the first time in months, both of them slept peacefully. The courtroom was packed. Sir Lionel Ashcroft sat at the front with his barrister, looking smug and self-satisfied. Behind him sat a gallery of fashionable observers, including Abigail Thornley, Margaret Elwood, and Henrietta Collins, all eager to watch Eliza's humiliation. Eliza sat beside Edmund, wearing her plainest dress, a simple grey gown that made no attempt at grandeur. She wanted the court to see her as she truly was. The magistrate, Lord Justice Pemberton, was an elderly man with sharp eyes and a sceptical expression. Sir Lionel's barrister, a man named Mr. Reginald Blunt, began by painting a damning picture of Edmund's judgment. Your Honour, the Duke of Blackmere is a grieving man who has acted rashly. In his pain, he has allowed an unsuitable woman, a governess with no family, no connections, no credentials beyond a simple recommendation, to insinuate herself into his household and manipulate him into marriage. Objection, Mr. Hawley said. Miss Morland has not manipulated anyone. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Blunt continued. Within weeks of her arrival, His Grace proposes marriage. This is clearly a woman who saw an opportunity and seized it. Eliza kept her expression neutral, though her hands were clenched in her lap. Mr. Blunt called Sir Lionel to testify. Sir Lionel, when did you first become concerned about the children's welfare? When I heard His Grace had employed an unmarried woman to live in his household without any chaperone or oversight. It was highly irregular, and your concern grew when he announced his engagement to this woman. Of course, the Duke is not thinking clearly. He is being led by improper emotions rather than rational judgment. Mr. Hawley stood for cross-examination. Sir Lionel, have you met the Duke's children? I met them briefly, after their mother's death. How long did you spend with them? An afternoon. And in that afternoon, did you ascertain their emotional state? Their needs? Sir Lionel shifted uncomfortably. They were grieving. Children grieve. Did you offer comfort? Support? I encouraged them to be strong. I see. Do you know Charlotte's favorite color? Edward's favorite food? What stories they enjoy? No, that is not relevant. On the contrary, it is entirely relevant. You claim to be concerned for their welfare, yet you know nothing about them as individuals, the gallery murmured. Sir Lionel's face reddened. Then Mr. Hawley called Eliza to the stand. She walked to the front of the courtroom, acutely aware of every eye on her. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Mr. Hawley began gently. Miss Morland, please tell the court how you came to be employed at Blackmere. Eliza described the advertisement, her desperate circumstances, her arrival at the station. She did not hide her poverty or her lack of connections. What was your first impression of the children? They were heartbroken. They were so quiet, so careful. Charlotte was trying to be a mother to her younger brother. Edward had stopped speaking entirely. They were both terrified that everyone would leave them. And what did you do? I stayed. I read to them. I played with them. I taught them that it was safe to be children again. Has their condition improved under your care? Yes. Charlotte is confident and joyful. Edward is beginning to form words again, though he is not yet speaking. They laugh. They hope. They trust. Mr. Blunt stood for cross-examination. His expression, predatory. Miss Morland, is it true you were dismissed from your previous lodging? I was not dismissed. The boarding house closed, and before that, what was your employment history? I worked as a lady's companion for 2 years before the family relocated to India, and before that, I lived with my parents until their deaths. So you have no formal education in child rearing, no credentials. I have common sense and compassion. That is what the children needed. How convenient. Mr. Blunt's voice dripped with disdain. Tell me, Miss Morland, do you deny that you saw an opportunity to elevate yourself by marrying a duke? I deny it completely. I agreed to marry His Grace to protect his children from precisely this sort of interference. How noble. And yet you benefit enormously from this arrangement, do you not? From poverty to Duchess, quite a leap. Eliza met his eyes steadily. I do not want to be a Duchess, Mr. Blunt. I want to be Charlotte and Edward's mother. That is all I have ever wanted. But you are not their mother. You are a governess who has overstepped her position. I am the person who has loved them when no one else would. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Lord Justice Pemberton banged his gavel. Mr. Blunt pressed on. The fact remains, Miss Morland, that you are entirely unsuitable for the position of Duchess of Blackmere. You have no breeding, no education, no understanding of the responsibilities involved. You are correct, Eliza said quietly. I am not fit to be a duchess by society's standards. I am too plain, too common, too unremarkable, in every way. But I am fit to love Charlotte and Edward. I am fit to make them feel safe. I am fit to put their needs above my own comfort and reputation. If that makes me unsuitable, then so be it. Edmund stood suddenly. Your Honor, may I speak? Lord Justice Pemberton frowned. This is highly irregular, Your Grace. I do not care about irregularity. I care about the truth. The magistrate hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. Edmund walked to the center of the courtroom, commanding immediate attention. I was a broken man when Miss Morland arrived at Blackmere. I had retreated so far into my grief that I abandoned my own children to theirs. I let them suffer in silence because I could not bear my own pain. His voice rang through the chamber. Miss Morland did not manipulate me into marriage. She challenged me. She forced me to see what I had become, a ghost in my own house. She brought my children back to life. And in doing so, she brought me back as well. He turned to face Sir Lionel directly. You claim to care about Charlotte and Edward's welfare, but you do not know them. You have never tried to know them. You see them as pawns in a game of revenge against me for marrying the woman you coveted. Sir Lionel surged to his feet. That is a lie. Edmund pulled the letters from his pocket. Is it? Then explain these. Explain the venom you wrote to my late wife when she rejected you. Explain your promise that you would not forget the insult. Mr. Hawley presented the letters to the magistrate. Lord Justice Pemberton read them in silence, his expression growing progressively grimmer. Sir Lionel, the magistrate said coldly, these letters paint a very different picture of your motives than the one you presented to this court. I was upset. It was years ago. It has no bearing. It has every bearing. You have wasted this court's time with a vendetta disguised as concern for children you do not know and do not care about. Edmund continued. Miss Morland is the finest person I have ever known. She is brave, compassionate, selfless. She is exactly what my children need. She is exactly what I need. And if this court cannot see that, then the failure lies not with her but with a system that values titles over hearts. He walked to Eliza and took her hand, lifting her from the witness stand. I am going to marry this woman, he said. Not because I have to, because I choose to, because she is the only person in the world I want beside me for the rest of my life. The courtroom was utterly silent. Lord Justice Pemberton set down the letters. Your Grace, I have heard quite enough. This petition is denied. Sir Lionel Ashcroft, you are hereby censured for bringing a frivolous case before this court, motivated by personal animosity. The children will remain in their father's custody. Sir Lionel's face went purple with rage. Furthermore, the magistrate continued. I wish to state for the record that Miss Morland demonstrated more genuine concern for those children in 10 minutes of testimony than you have shown in your entire petition. Your Grace, you have my permission to marry this remarkable woman with my blessing. He banged the gavel. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Abigail and her companions sat frozen in shock. Sir Lionel stormed out, his barrister scrambling after him. Edmund pulled Eliza into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone. When they finally broke apart, Eliza was crying and laughing at the same time. We won, she whispered. You won, Edmund corrected. You were magnificent. Outside the courtroom, Charlotte and Edward were waiting with Mrs. Grimsby, who had stayed with them. When they heard the news, both children launched themselves at Eliza, nearly knocking her down the courthouse steps. You are ours forever now, Charlotte said fiercely. Forever and ever, forever and ever, Eliza agreed. They married the following Saturday in the small village chapel near Blackmere, surrounded by flowers from their garden and attended by the entire village. Charlotte served as flower girl. Edward carried the rings on a small velvet cushion, his face solemn with importance. Eliza wore a simple cream gown that Mrs. Grimsby had helped her sew. No jewels, no elaborate styling, just Eliza as she truly was. When Edmund saw her walking down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears. They spoke their vows clearly, without hesitation. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Edmund kissed her softly, reverently, as though she were something precious. The wedding breakfast was held at Blackmere, in the garden they had restored together. The roses were in full bloom, their scent filling the air. The children ran wild with the village youngsters, laughing and shrieking with joy. Edmund pulled Eliza aside for a moment, into the quiet of the walled garden. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that she had learned to treasure. "I love you, Duchess." She laughed. "I am still not fit to be a duchess. Then I suppose I will have to spend the rest of my life proving you wrong." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands cradling her face. When they finally returned to the party, Charlotte grabbed Eliza's hand. "Mama Eliza, come see what Edward and I made." Mama Eliza. The name wrapped around her heart and squeezed tight. She let the children pull her toward their creation, a flower crown they had woven from roses and ivy. "For you," Edward said clearly. His first full sentence. Eliza knelt so he could place it on her head. "It is beautiful." "Thank you, my darling boy." Edmund stood nearby, watching his family complete at last, and felt peace settle over him like a benediction. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were finally asleep, Edmund and Eliza stood together on the terrace, looking out over the moonlit moors. "Do you ever regret it?" Edmund asked. "Coming here? Agreeing to all of this?" Eliza leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body beside hers. "Not for a single moment. Even though society will always question your place, let them question. I know who I am now. I am Charlotte and Edward's mother. I am your wife. I am exactly where I belong." He turned her in his arms and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I do not deserve you. Edmund, we are past deserving. We simply are." They stood there in the moonlight, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a family from the ashes of grief. Inside, Charlotte dreamed of her garden. Edward dreamed of his mother's smile and his new mother's laughter. And in the walled garden, the roses bloomed impossibly bright, as though blessed by something larger than themselves. Eliza and Edmund's journey shows us that worth is not measured by titles or society's narrow standards, but by the depth of our love and the courage to protect those we cherish. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that they are exactly right, just as they are. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you are watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. From all of us here, thank you for watching. We are already crafting our next tale of forbidden love and second chances, a story of a forgotten bride and a promise that refuses to die. You will not want to miss it. Until then, may you find your own happiness in the most unexpected places. Professional regards, and we will see you in the next video. Thank you.